don't like doing lists, but AB put it out there. Nick informed me the generation, typically people are talking about 10 years, in a 10-year
I think in sports
window.
generation. Yeah, I think this is, for the audience, I think you should, typically we think of generations as around 20 to 25 years. In sports, I would look at it as AB's generation is the post-Moss TO generation. So
Okay.
That's just like I would say the Moss TO generation was the post Chris Carter, Michael Irvin, Jerry Rice generation. Like, those aren't 20-year windows, but I think that's how we look at it in sports. So
if that's the way I was going to look at it, then there's one player who's retired I'd have to add. I'd make a short list, a list of 5. And one would be a player that was retired before that. That's Calvin Johnson. If I'm looking at the last 10 years, I have to include Calvin. His impact on the NFL, he saw coverages, was very, very rare. I only saw Randy Moss and Calvin Johnson have 2 people line up on them at the goal line like they were punting the football. Never seen. Jerry Rice didn't have coverage like that. So Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald still playing at a high level, has dominated pro football the last 10 years. And then we get to the guys that are creme de la creme of the receiving core that we have. And that's AB. He's at the head of that class. Right behind him is Julio Jones. And the third person, or the fifth one in this generation, would be A.J. Green. Those players, all right? Those players in that order: Calvin Johnson, all right, because he dominated pro football, even though he had a shorter career. We're talking about the last 10 years. Larry Fitzgerald, no one's had, because he's been in it, he's the only player been in it the whole 10 years. And then we got guys that have dominated football, I would say, the last 5 to 7 years. That is the 3 of AB, Julio, and A.J. Green.
All right, so I would disagree, but not vehemently at the very top of the list. Calvin's peak was higher than Fitzgerald's, but Fitzgerald's played so much longer, and his raw accumulation numbers.
I didn't say him as far as how I ranked him.
Okay,
because he's out of the game.
All right, fair enough. Because of course, you know this. This is red meat for me. I love making lists. I love doing this type of stuff. I said Fitz, Calvin, then I would have Antonio Brown. And right after Antonio Brown, Julio. And you can make the argument A.J. Green or Odell. Has Odell done enough in just 47 games? Here's the thing for AB, though, and this is the question I want to ask you. Does AB have the ability to end up ranking at the top if you were to do a ranking? Does he have the ability to surpass Larry Fitzgerald, to surpass Calvin Johnson? Because I think he does have the ability. Now, we'll see his health. We'll see his productivity if he can maintain it. The most impressive thing about Fitzy, much like yourself, is, man, he's just done it for so long. It's such a high level, year after year of 1,000+ yards. After you thought Fitzy's career was winding down 3 years ago, or not you, but I thought his career was winding down. The question is, how long can he stay in this prime for Antonio Brown?
I believe Antonio will stay in this prime for those 3 years. The reason why it's hard to pass Larry Fitzgerald is a couple of things. They're intangibles. As a football coach, I know Coach Pagano, he'll appreciate this. Larry Fitzgerald is the best blocking wide receiver in pro football. He brings a physicality to the position that you don't account for. Like, you have all these little small guys that run around. We talk a lot of trash and everything, but physicality, a coach is not thinking that's going to be part of the equation. His ability to make the remarkable catch will never be something that AB will ever be able to get on that corner.
Oh, wow.
Larry Fitzgerald, arguably, you can say he has the greatest hands that have ever played in pro football. So those things. And then the third thing, when was the last time you heard something bad about Larry? You're talking about a team leader. You're talking about a guy who's dependable. You're talking about a guy who's mentoring people, not only during the season, cooking meals for guys in the off season. He has, 24 guys from around the NFL staying in his house in Minnesota. So those are things right there that I think AB, he can be good. He can put up numbers, touchdowns, receptions, yards after the catch. But in those categories, he would never be able to touch Larry Fitzgerald.
I want to just give people a little context, because I think when we do talk about the best players of the generation, people talk about Calvin because he was such a freak physically. He was unlike anybody I've ever quite seen play the position. Randy was a freak in a different way. But Calvin was so much bigger from just a weight standpoint. He was
big and run.
Right, big and could run almost as fast as Randy. So Calvin, people forget Fitzgerald. I just want to let the audience know this: 1,234 catches, 110 touchdowns. That's Fitzgerald. 1,318 catches, 102 touchdowns. That's Julio and Antonio Brown combined. Okay?
Wow.
So, like, those almost identical numbers, those two careers combined. If you combine Calvin Johnson's career and Odell's career, You have almost the same number of yards as Larry and almost the same number of touchdowns. Larry doing this after it looked like, I'm being totally honest, in 2014, we looked like Larry was on the downside. He had 700 yards, he had 2 touchdowns in 14 games that season. He followed that up over the next 3 years with 3,300 yards and with 21 touchdowns. Larry hitting a secondary, not quite prime, but a secondary peak is remarkable.
Yeah, in that 700, though, he strained his MCL. That was also the offseason. He didn't utilize me. Productivity went down to 2.